Hey everybody, welcome to Late to the Lore, and today I want to talk about monofilament versus braid line, which one I personally like the most and why. First I want to talk about monofilament line. Now I've been using monofilament line my entire life, just like most other people, and if you're new to fishing, this is probably what's going to be on your rod and reel setup to come with. Every push button I've ever seen comes with it already pre-spooled on there. And if you got a spinning reel, you're most likely going to use this. And if I'm being honest with you, there is nothing wrong with 10-pound test monofilament line. This is actually going to be what most people are going to use in every single fishing situation. Contrary to what they're going to tell you, you watch a lot of different videos. The thing that people have wrong about test line is it's not how big of a fish it can get. 10-pound fish is not that's not what it's talking about. What it's talking about is 10 pounds of pressure on the line. Now, a 10-pound fish is probably only going to do like 5 pounds of pressure as you're reeling them in. So the difference is how far, shit that hurts, how much pressure you can put on it before it snaps. And I can tell you this right now, this is starting to go into my skin. I'm a pretty stout dude. This is putting way more than 10 pounds of pressure on there. So your standard 10-pound test line is actually going to do far more than what other people tell you. If you're going after some big, 50-pound fish in the ocean, I wouldn't recommend this. But your standard bass fisherman, you're going to be fine with a 10-pound test regardless as to what anybody says. Like I said, you're going to see a lot of people, you're not going to catch anything big with that. Yes, you will. Yeah, I have my entire life. Even though the channel says Late to the Lure, I've been fishing my whole life. I just started using lures. That's the whole thing. I've always used worms and shiners. One thing I did want to explain is what monofilament means. It means it's just one single fiber of plastic, and that's all that is. So it's just, it's pretty easy to tie on. Comes on your standard reels. It doesn't bind up too bad. The problem that you end up having with the monofilament, though, is here. I'll show you. Once you get into a thicker test, this is 17-pound test. I got it to use on my baitcaster when I first got my baitcaster. And again, I'm telling you that you can feel this stretching, and I'm already putting more than 17 pounds of pressure. So these lines, they're going to hold up, generally speaking, as long as you buy a decent line, they're going to hold up for a lot more than they say they will. But like this one it's a bit thicker and harder to cast because it's 17 pound, and that's where you start to get into the advantage of braid lines. Braid fishing line is, quite honestly, I'm just going to stop it right here and just say this is my favorite thing to use now, but it does have some drawbacks. First, I'd like to say what braid is. It's actually like it's like the threads that they use to sew your clothes together, but they weave it together, and I don't know how many strands there are in this, but this line that's about as thick as this 10-pound test, this is 30 pound, and I can tell you again, you're putting way more than 30 pounds of pressure on this. The problem that I have with braid, and we'll get into that in a minute, is it'll cut right through your skin. That I didn't know, so as I was spooling it, I wasn't paying attention, and I actually just sliced right here in my finger. It wasn't too bad. I didn't feel it as it was going in, but it definitely hurt the next day. One other thing about braid is when you first put it on your line, it's actually a little stiff. Once it gets worked, it breaks itself in, and it just becomes super easy to use. For my spinning reel, it took a little bit more to get used to. On my bait caster, it was super nice to switch to. I went from getting backlashes and shitty casts with this to getting really nice casts with this, and pretty much no backlashes. I didn't teleport, I just didn't think you wanted to see my ass. The thing with spinning rods and braid, though, is when you go to cast, if you're like me, and you hold it here, when you release, the line will come right off your finger, which generally isn't a bad, that's just usually how it goes, and it'll slide right off. But with the braid, you got one of two choices. You can either get a pair of bitch mittens, which, look, wear them. This doesn't feel good. Or you can just slowly develop a callus, and eventually it's going to stop cutting. But I will say this, there are times after I've been fishing with this for a while, I switched to my bait caster because the string has just ate up my fingers. That said, I've found that when it comes to braid, it has been so much easier to cast. I've gotten it stuck in a lot of different places, and it's been able to pull the braid. The braid's been able to, have the strength to pull right out of things. Some people will tell you that when you're using braid, you have to use monofilament or a fluorocarbon lead on it. I personally have not found that to be the case. I think a lot of people say that because this is a titch expensive, and to constantly be cutting it off for your different lures, hooks, and whatever can be a little expensive. Like, I was watching one famous fishing YouTuber showing, as he's fishing, he's sitting there blasting them out, and the things are just keep on eating his lures and breaking off the monofilament line because whatever he was dealing with had teeth apparently. And he's just losing crankbait after crankbait after crankbait and laughing about it. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't have $5 every time I cast to just throw out there. So you know what? If it's going to take me to spend a little bit extra money on this line, but I can pull up that log and get my friggin' lure back, I'm going to spend the money on this. And that's really the biggest drawback, is the cost. I personally don't think I will ever switch back to anything other than braid. Like I said, it took a little getting used to. But if you're just getting into fishing and you're really, you're wondering, oh, should I get this line? Should I get that line? I'm telling you this right now. Anybody that tells you that 10-pound test isn't good or isn't worth it is they're just full of it. I mean, they're just full of it. I mean, I can see where if you're in a really brushy environment, there's a lot of just shit around where you might not want to really use this. But I'm 42 years old. I've been fishing since I was little, and I've never actually had the line snap. My entire life, my line has never snapped. Now, before somebody's like, oh, that's bullshit. No. My knot has snapped. Like right where the hook is, that's where I've lost it. But I've never actually had, just in the middle of reeling one in, the line just snapped. It's never happened. And quite frankly, I've never actually seen it happen. I've even seen YouTube videos where people are like, oh, my line snapped. No, you're not let go. That's what happened. It was just because, it's a little bit weaker. Okay, I guess it's time to do an outro before I just sit here rambling on and on and on about which line is better. It's not a matter of which line is better. It's going to be a matter of what you personally like to use and kind of what's in your budget. And that might sound like some softball answer, but it's actually the most real answer I could honestly give you. Personally, if you can afford braided line, it's about $20 a spool. I highly recommend it. I'm using Trilene, what is this, 30 pound. Instead of losing a few lures that I would have lost prior to this, I pulled up a friggin' log, and as much of a pain in the neck as that was, it was kind of nice not losing my stuff. That said, this stuff is great. Monofilament 10-pound test is all you're ever really going to need. If you are going for some heavier, some stronger fish, you can go up to, a higher test pound line. But overall, for most people just fishing for bass, 10-pound test is really what you're going to need. And I can't fathom any real reason why I need something different. I'm not going for giant catfish. I'm not going for giant world record fish. I'm fishing in a tiny pond. There ain't no monster that's going to be bigger than this. That's another thing to keep into account. What size is the body of water that you're fishing in? How fished is it? If a lot of people are fishing there, on a regular basis, you're probably not going to have that, world record 25-pound bass that nobody's ever seen before. So you don't need this. You need this. If you can afford this and it's within your budget and you don't mind, losing line, then this, honestly, this is better. All right, if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you watching. I'm going to try to do more long-form videos, get a little bit more used to this. If you found any of this helpful, let me know. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.